Walk us through that darkest hour. How bad did it get?
That was probably one of the darkest times, but the greatest times for where I am today. I'll never forget how I got into sales. My mother said, you're going to go work at your father's this summer. He said, listen, I don't want you here. I don't want to see you. I don't want to hear you. Stay out of my way. When he got diagnosed with cancer, he went off for his treatments. This is the first time I ever saw the books. They were not good at all. And he rolled in the office. I just hear the screaming. Walls were rumbling. People are coming out their office going, what the hell's going on? And he's like, you effed up my business. He got nose to nose with me. He's like, I effing kill you. I said, I'm half your age. I'm twice your strength. I got 30 years of built up anger towards you. It was war, crazy war. And in the midst of this, he came back and he's like, I have 12 months to live.
You've written a book, and I love your book, Lead, Follow, or Get Out of the Way. I don't know why you didn't call it Get the Fuck Out of the Way.
It was going to be, but the person, when we were doing it, they were like, Greg, you can't use the F word on the book title. It's going to be,
in chapter 10, you have a chapter about tenacity. The title is, Are Yours Brass Enough? Which I loved. It's a short, compact book with really hard-hitting lessons and examples. And you also talked in that chapter about your father, Paul, who's, passed since, but, you work closely with your dad, Paul, in a tough family business environment. And I just wanted to ask you, what was the most challenging moment you had working with your father? How did it shape your view on leadership, and specifically what we were just talking about, which is that tenacity, that persistence?
There's two stories for that. So the reason I started working for him was I was forced to. My mother said, you're going to go work at your father's this summer.
Your mom,
I was
right?
I was like, oh God, this is the last place I want to be, because we didn't have a good relationship. He was a tough guy, really, really, really tough guy. Later on in life, I recognized a couple things, which was, it was always great to have him on my side, but boy, being across the table from that guy, it was the last place you wanted to be. But as I walked in that office the first time, the first thing he said to me, he said, listen, I don't want you here. He said, the only reason you're here is because of your mother. He says, I don't want to see you. I don't want to hear you, right? Stay out of my way, and go and report into, her name was Diane. She was the receptionist back then. I walked up to Diane, and Diane looked at me and she's like, oh, so sorry, Greg. I'm like, all right, well, what do I do? And she's like, well, here's some envelopes to go lick and stamp, and here's some brochures to fold. And that was it. And it was made very clear that this is not a free ride and you're not welcome here. So you either perform and show up and prove. And I'll never forget how I got into sales. So I'm seeing all these sales folks, right? And they've got this great job. They're meeting people and they're closing deals and they're getting commission and they're having drinks at the end of the day and they're high-fiving each other. And I'm just kind of standing in the corner being like, look how cool these people are. I remember I went up to my dad and I was like, hey, listen, can I switch into sales? And he looked at me, and I'll never forget this. And he said, are you effing out of your mind? I said, what do you mean? He was like, do you think I would remotely take a chance and let you get into sales and mess up a sale? Hell no. And back then, sales were everything. I mean, the pressure to close and sell, right? So everyone's busy one day, and someone walked in off the street. We used to run ads in newspapers and like subways. And it's amazing. I mean, how many times people would cut these ads out of the newspaper and carry them, and they would walk in the office and be like, I've been carrying this ad, and it would say like, do you need to learn how to be assertive? Call us. Like, are you too shy to ask for a raise? Call us. Like, are you too scared to give a wedding speech? So some guy rolled in and he's like, hi, I've been carrying this ad in my wallet and I wanted to find out more about the program. And no one was around. It was the end of the day. Everyone had left, because we used to see a lot of appointments at like 5, 6, 7 p.m. And I was like, yes, I can see you. And I knew enough about the process and enough about the program, and sort of had watched and observed and mimicked and, picked up a few things. And I said, come sit down, and went through it. And as I'm in the office and there was a window there, I see this sort of shadow walk by the window, right? And it stops and it backs up, and it's my father. And he looks at me, and I knew he would not open that door. There was no way. He was a superstitious guy. There was no way he was interrupting the flow of a sale. So he's looking at me. He's like, you, pointing at me through the window. He's like, get out of the office. Right? And I just kind of turned around and I didn't look at him, and went through the process and went through the script. I mean, back then there was a sales script that you followed. And I went through it. Anyway, I closed the deal. It was $2,000 first sale. And I rolled out and I was like, I just closed it. I was like, I closed the deal. And he said, all right, tomorrow show up with a shirt and a tie and you're in sales. And by the age of like 22, 23, I was the highest performing salesperson. You know, I loved it for a long time. That's all I did. I just sold and sold and sold and sold. And then I got into facilitation and, started to, become very successful at that. And, then started to get requests. They started to say, hey, can you send the son in to do the training instead of the father? Which I think was a bittersweet for him. It was like a proud moment for him, but it was also a little bit of an ego knock. And that was sort of story one. So that was walking in and being told that I'm not welcome, I shouldn't be there. And basically, the proof is in the pudding and you will get out of what you put in. And I think that was probably some of the greatest training I ever received, ever. The most other difficult time working with him was when he got diagnosed with cancer. And this was in 2011. Now, by this point, I had matured in the business a lot. We had a whole other business, which was technical training. I was running that side of the business. And when he went off for his treatments, I said to him, I said, look, I'll take over your role. I'll sort of help run the business while you're getting treatments and you won't have to stress and worry about it. And this is the first time I ever saw the books. Like, I didn't see the books. I didn't know anything about it. I just knew I sold, I hit my targets, I got my salary. That was it. And they were not good. They were not good at all. I'm just looking, going like, this, there's no money. Where's all the money? So I'm like, okay, now I don't want to stress him out. So I now take this on. And I think at the time it was probably like in the line of credit, which in a lot of cases isn't a lot of money. It was probably minus 200,000, and just cranked it for 6 months and brought that line of credit down to minus 50. And he rolled in the office. And I just hear the screaming coming out of the finance office. And like every second, I swear so much because I was raised by a pure swearer, right?
Right.
Every second word was F, 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 F. So I rolled in there and I'm like, hey, whoa, 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 chill out a little bit. You got to calm down. Like, we have staff here. Walls were rumbling. People are coming out their office going, what the hell's going on? Like, Paul's back now. Like, oh my God. And he looked at me and he's like, you effed up my business. And I was like, what? He was like, we're minusing the account and the expenditures, and you need to go and fire this person, and you need to get rid of this person. You need to take away this person's car payments, and you need to reduce this salary in that person. And I was like, whoa. I'm like, you got to slow down a little bit, right? Like, you just rolled back in here. You're really reactive right now. All the people and these financial decisions that you're making are going to impact top performers in the organization and people that contribute a lot to revenue, right? And by the way, like, it was way worse when you left 6-7 months ago. Like, I've actually done a lot better. And he was like, this is my business and this is the decision that I've made. And he just goes off. And I looked at him and I was like, listen, you do whatever the F you want. I'm like, I'm done with this. And he said, what did you say to me? And he came around the table and he got nose to nose with me. And he's like, I will effing kill you. And he's like physical with me at this point. And I'll never forget this moment. I looked at him and I said, listen, I'm half your age. I'm twice your strength. I've got, at this point, I'm about 31, 32 years old. I'm like, I got 30 years of built up anger towards you and I will unleash it right now. And they'll have to pull me off you, right? So you have one shot. And then all of a sudden I felt a hand on my shoulder and I turned around and it was the coach that I hired, because when he went off, I didn't know anything about being a CEO right. or P&L. So I hired a coach. I was like, teach me how to run finances and P&Ls and be a CEO. Put his hand. He's like, let's get out of here. And we rolled up again, coincidentally, to a Starbucks and sat down and I just burst into tears. And just all came out, like all that unexpressed emotion for years and years and years and years and years. Because, we had a really great relationship on the golf course and we had a great relationship at the boardroom table, but that was about it. Everything else was kind of not there. Coach said to me, he said, what do you want to do? I said, I think I'm at a stage I need to quit. I need to leave. So I rolled back in the office. I said, look, I quit. There was two businesses. I was like, let's separate the businesses out, take on all the staff, and we'll move into technical training. And I'm going to be done. And it was war. It was war for about 2 months, like crazy war between me and him, because I was just unfiltered and unyielding at that point. And in the midst of this, I'll never forget, we're sitting at his house and it's me, it's my mother, and it's him. And we're just going at him. My mother's trying to sort of mediate between both of us, and the phone rings and it's his doctor. And he's basically, they say, listen, you've been re-diagnosed with cancer. We need you to come back in. So we stopped the conversation. He went back and he came back and he's like, I have 12 months to live. Doctor gave him a timeline, said 12 months. And by that point, we had squashed it. We had, put the conflict aside. Life sometimes throws these things at you, which are more important to deal with. I ended up buying the business from him for $1, right? And also very young and inexperienced, right? Someone said you should bankrupt the corporation. I'm like, no, we can't bankrupt it. We need to pay everyone back, and remortgaged my house and paid everything off and paid off the line of credits. And, it was the right decision from one aspect, but it was the wrong sort of financial decision, right? And to that day, 12 months later, he passed. And I
Wow.
remember saying to him, like, man, for the guy that you are, that like you're in the business that you're in, for the things that you've created, you can't think this way. Like your mindset, back to what we talked about before. But he internally made up his mind. He had said, listen, I'm dying in 12 months. And to the day, literally passed.
Wow. Now your mother Marian was a speech, what, like a
Pathologist.
voice therapist?
Yeah, voice coach.
How did she impact your life? And I know you were born in South Africa, you end up in Canada. How did you like grow up? How did that affect your worldview? And how important was your mom in who you became?
Really great question. My mother is the ultimate nurturing parent. I think in a lot of cases, if it wasn't for my mother, I don't know where I would be today. I don't know where the family would be. She was really sort of the pinnacle anchor. She worked in the business and, helped create the presentation skills and the voice programs. She eventually went off and started her own business, which was skincare and cosmetics, which today is a very, very, very successful business in manufacturing and skincare. But she has been probably one of the most important people when it's come down to mentorship and guidance, but more importantly, I think support. As people, we need people in our lives that we can lean on. And sometimes it's not always a parent, sometimes it's not always a friend. This is where, as human beings, we look for mentors and we look for coaches, and we look for these individuals. But there's a great Chinese proverb that says, if you want to go fast, you go by yourself. If you want to go far, you go with others. And I would attest or credit a lot of my success today because of the foundation and the support and the guidance and the patience that my mother brought. Because by definition, my father was the token critical parent, my mother was the token nurturing parent. In an absence of having her there, I think we would have grown up in a very different environment and a different home.
Now, big thing that influenced you also was an Apple. So
Yeah,
I think in the early 2000s, you kind of fell in love with Apple, its products. And how did you convince your dad to have this whole new division in
to the
his
business. Yeah,
company around technology and software? And I'm thinking now what's happening with AI, right?
right,
But
right.
how did you convince him, given who he was, to
Yeah.
let you do something very different?
Yeah. So, there's a theme to my story, which is like, right place, right time, and just kind of, found myself falling into it. So early days of the business, there was a big video production side. We used to film a lot, and remember, if someone missed a class, they could come and borrow a VHS tape and watch that pre-recorded session. So we had this guy Darren that was working for the company, and he was doing all the video stuff, and he was also teaching Paul back then how to sort of edit with the new software. Now, Apple's really famous for creative platforms, right? Video editing, audio, music, photography, also IT. And I rolled into the office one day, and Darren and him are in the office and they're on speakerphone. And I sort of just kind of pop in and I'm listening, and I hear them say, all right, we're super excited to be taking on Apple, and really excited about moving forward. And this was Darren. Darren was the one that brokered this whole relationship, because Apple was looking for training centers to take on what they called their certified training.
Wow.
So
Okay.
they created all the programs and the certifications for trainers, but they wanted to outsource this to partners. And as you said, I had just become a big fan of the Apple platform. I think I had just bought my first
An
um,
iPod?
iPod. I was like
Yeah.
podcast, no iPod, and I looked at him and I was like, listen, with respect, I know you're just entertaining Darren right now. You have zero motivation to take this on, nor do I think it's the right fit for you. Let me take this on. I'm like, I know how to sell training. I know how to package training. I know how to sort of get trainers up. I know how to brand us. Like, this could be something I take on. And he did it not because he saw the future of it. He did it because it was like, great, I don't have to deal with this. You go deal with it. And Darren and I ran out and we bought our first iMac. We only had one computer to train people, and that's a one person at a time. Anyway, this was early 2004, maybe end of 2003. By the time we had hit 2005, 2006, we had 5 offices across Canada. We had about 30 trainers. We were the highest performing Apple training center in North America, to the point that Apple called us up and they said, we don't know what the hell you're doing, but like, holy, like your numbers, like your revenue numbers, the amount of participants you're putting through the program. So they became big fans of us. And it was quite simple because the people that they would then get to do the training before were usually IT folks, right?
Right.
So some weird IT guy, right? Or a retail store. And the only reason the retail stores were doing the training was because they would sell the product and they would then sell the training, right? Well, we'll train you if you buy the product, which was interesting because I then went to all the retail stores and said, look, I'll create a partnership with you. I'll do a revenue model with you guys, which will get you earning more money out of the training, right? Without any of the overhead and without taking on the cost, which was absolutely brilliant. And yeah, from 2004 to 2010, on a professional standpoint, if you had touched a Mac computer for video editing or photography or audio, there was like a 75, 80% chance you would come through one of my training centers. But in 2010, I saw the writing on the wall. I was like, YouTube. I'm like, we're competing with YouTube right now. We got kids on YouTube running all these tutorial videos on how to learn how to use the software. And we're going to find ourselves in a position pretty soon. So I'm running this business, but I'm doing all the leadership training. Right?
So you have tech training and the leadership training.
Yeah. So I'm actually not doing the tech training. We got trainers doing that. I'm doing all the leadership training and the Witz stuff. And, by the time we hit, he had passed and I had sat down with the team and we had decided to sell off the Apple business and got together with the team. And I said, all right, what do we want to do? Like, who do we want to be? And the team sat down and said, listen, why don't we do this? Why don't we run the training for a little bit? Let's just go back to work. Let's just do the pure work. Let's just do the training and the coaching, not because we're trying to make money, but just because we're believers in what we offer and what we do. And it is life-changing for people. And let's just do that. And we did that. And that was the rebirth of Witz. And then that's what expanded and sort of we discovered the next purpose-driven statement, which was making humans better humans.
No, I love that. So let me take you back to, your father's past. You merge these, you have Witz education, you're really focused on what you want to do, but you've been candid about facing, near bankruptcy. And walk us through that darkest hour. How bad did it get? And how did you turn things around?
It was bad in the sense it wasn't, it was bad. I had remortgaged my house. I wasn't taking a salary. My wife at that point, Leia, we were just dating and, we were engaged at that point as well. It was a lot of hand to mouth at that point, trying to figure out sort of how do I pay bills. I got like 60, 90, 120, right? 180 AR, right? Or AP. So I got people screaming at me, being like, hey, you owe me money, you owe me money. So I'm like in this dance of like trying to convince people to still stick it out with us and still work with us. And it was tough. It was tough for a couple years. And truthfully, back to what we talked about with the whole failure standpoint, that was my PhD in business. That was probably one of the darkest times, but the greatest times for where I am today, which was being able to navigate all of that and manage it.
I mean, how do you teach someone to bounce back from like rock bottom moments when everything looks absolutely helpless?
Yeah. I remember saying to myself at the time, being like, well, it can't get any worse. How much worse can this be? Right. So, loans out at the bank and again, owing money to everyone. And You know, it's like, well, I mean, if this is as bad as it gets, I still wake up. I got a client, every time I say to him, I'm like, how you doing today? He's like, as long as you wake up on the right side of the dirt, it's a good day. And I'm like, I've learned to appreciate that.